10. Bolivia Train Graveyard. Salar de Uyuni, the world's largest salt flat, is situated high on a mountainous plain in southwest Bolivia. In 1888, as local mining grew, British engineers were invited here to develop a railway network that reached the Pacific. Bolivian authorities believed if the country had a decent transport system, the area would flourish. The lines were finished in 1892, despite persistent sabotage by the local Aymara indigenous people who considered the railway a threat to their way of life. Tin was an especially profitable material, and soon Bolivia became one of the world's leading producers. However, by the 1940s, the mining industry had failed due to the exhaustion of mineral reserves. Many steam trains were left abandoned on the salt flats when the railway fell out of service. Today, the sight of rusted steam engines frying in the desert sun is rather unusual. Dozens of decaying trains scatter the region. Because there are no gates or guards, the metal components of most of the trains have been taken, and some of the gutted sections litter the surrounding area. The train cemetery, marked only by a small sign that doesn't explain very much, has become something of a tourist attraction. There's been plans to convert the area into a museum, but nothing has been finalized. 9. Alang Shipbreaking Yard. While some ships, especially military ships, are sunk deliberately to make man-made reefs, the vast majority are broken down and repurposed for scrap. The Alang Shipbreaking Yard in India is the largest shipbreaking yard in the world. Ships must eventually die, and this commonly occurs on the shores of Alang. The Alang Shipbreaking Yard was founded in 1983. It quickly surpassed Pakistan's Gadani Shipbreaking Yard as the world's largest ship devourer. Almost half of all recovered ships across the globe were recycled here in 2012. Alang has a total capacity of 4.5 million light displacement tonnage (LDT), which is the weight of a vessel without fuel and other components. Large supertankers, auto ferries, container ships, and in the past ocean liners are among the yard's pieces. In 2009, the Sea-Wise Giant, the world's longest ship, was broken up in Alang. At high tide, these ships are beached, and as the tide recedes, hundreds of manual laborers begin the perilous and time-consuming task of disassembling them. What may be rescued is saved, and the remainder is discarded. The Indian Union Finance Minister promised in 2021 that the country's ship recycling capacity would be doubled by 2024. More ships from Europe and Japan would be brought in to fulfill this goal. In 2020 alone, there were 196 ships beached there. India doesn't have the strongest marine environmental protection policies, which presumably made it easier to carry out the dangerous and unpleasant task of destroying the ships. Environmentalists there say several coral reefs have been entirely devastated. According to them, there are also toxic wastes, unusable oil, harmful gases, and even radioactive elements trapped in Alang. This place is basically one giant toxic graveyard for ships. 8. Basnas Car Cemetery. A visit to the junkyard probably isn't on your list of things to do in Sweden if you are planning your next vacation there. Unless, of course, you're a vehicle fanatic who can cheerfully spend hours staring under the hoods of numerous rusted out-of-use cars. If you are, then the Basnas Car Cemetery is the place for you. The Basnas Car Cemetery is located deep in the forest of Värmland near the Swedish-Norwegian border. The junkyard was founded in the 1950s by two brothers who collected old abandoned cars. They managed the business out of a house erected in the middle of a wooded field. The wrecked vehicles sat in the field at the front of the home, creating a front lawn that looked like something out of Stephen King's imagination. The brothers continued to collect Saabs, Volvos, Fords, Sunbeams, Buicks, Volkswagens, Opels, Fiats, and other 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s automobiles. Unfortunately, taming the dense woodland proved to be challenging. The cars were gradually taken over by nature, and the brothers were forced to accept the junkyard's final fate after 40 years. In the early 1990s, one of the brothers left the area, while the other stayed and tried to sell cars for parts or for their vintage value. Visiting the cemetery now would be quite the sight. The hoods are covered in moss, and tree branches extend through the windows. Rather than encroaching on nature, the cars appear to be blending in with the lush greenery. It may not fit your image of Sweden's countryside, with cottages perched on peaceful lakes, but it's undoubtedly one of the country's most unusual attractions. 7. Dhaka Rickshaw Graveyard. Dhaka, Bangladesh is one of the most populated cities in the world. And because there's so many people, that means a lot of traffic. Cars are bumper to bumper, and so are the rickshaws. Rickshaws are small two-wheeled vehicles with no doors, a chair-like body, and a collapsible hood. One can usually hold 1 or 2 passengers, and it's drawn by a man pedaling between 2 shafts. When festivals are going on, the number of rickshaws on the road in Dhaka increases to about 3 million, raising the risk of accidents and general road mayhem. Battery-powered vehicles that can be easily charged electrically and don't require the same superhuman effort from the driver are posing a rising threat to the traditional rickshaw. These vehicles, mostly built in India, are becoming increasingly popular since they're speedier and can carry more people or heavier loads. In the Mirpur area, a suburb of Bangladesh, thousands of rickshaws piled on top of each other to blot out the landscape, making it an unofficial junkyard. There are an estimated 15,000 human-powered pedal vehicles here, almost all of which are either hazardous or undesired after years of vying for customers on the chaotic streets. The bodies of worn-out rickshaws are deposited at a Dhaka cemetery once they've been ridden off. Have you ever taken a ride in a rickshaw? Tell us about it in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. 6. Orangemon Diamond Scrapyard. In the small town of Orangemon, Namibia, a vehicle scrapyard rests dormant. The Orangemon Diamond Vehicle Scrapyard is the home of one of the largest fleets of scrap vehicles in the entire world. There are even tanks from World War II. The town was created to house the mine workers and is located near the mouth of the Orange River. It's home to substantial diamond reserves, so the location is extremely restricted, with armed guards patrolling the perimeter, and permission is required to pass past the airport turnstiles. Anyone caught in possession of a diamond without permission faces a maximum sentence of 15 years in prison. Workers have been known to try to smuggle the stones out by stuffing them up their nostrils or shooting them over the fences with handmade crossbows. A homing pigeon was once discovered wearing a small jacket loaded with diamonds. A vehicle is not allowed to leave the mine compound once it's entered, presumably to prevent it from being used to carry diamonds out. Some of the rusted machinery from the 1920s, including World War II tanks that were once used to bulldoze sand. Previously, company leaders would proudly display the collection, but now, concerned about their public image, they've begun to refuse to allow pictures of the graveyard to be taken. 5. Motorcycle Graveyard of Lockport. In the city of Lockport, New York, there's an old abandoned warehouse full of old rusting motorcycles. The warehouse was built in 1875, according to city records, and covers an area of over 53,000 square feet, 4,924 meters. Coal cycle sales moved into the warehouse in the 1970s. Coles had been collecting motorcycles and other debris for almost 50 years, and it was once a booming company. But the property was eventually sold, and the business was taken over by Frank Murrell, the building's last owner, in 1997. Frank would later rename the company Coal Cycle Salvage, and he'd sell many of the remaining motorcycles in the warehouse. Regrettably, Frank shut down the company around 2007. The abandoned motorcycle-filled building has slowly succumbed to the elements and time. Motorcycles were literally falling through the roof on some floors. Within a few years after Frank closed it down, the city of Lockport took over the structure. The warehouse was dubbed the Lockport Motorcycle Graveyard and became a popular hangout for vandals. The building was supposed to be demolished in 2011, but it never happened due to difficulties with the State Historic Preservation Office. The office believed that the structure had significant historical value in the area and that it should not be demolished. 4. Chateaune Forest Car Graveyard. Until recently, the dense forests around Chateaune, a small Belgian town, concealed 4 graveyards with over 500 vehicles slowly succumbing to moss and rust. Only one of the graveyards survives to this day. The origin of how the cars got there is blurry. The most commonly told myth is that the graveyards originated around the conclusion of World War II, when American soldiers who couldn't afford to ship their automobiles home just left them in the woods, with more being added over time. Another, less exciting theory is that they were simply the ruins of a defunct graveyard. The majority of the automobiles were built in the 1950s and 1960s, and many of them were very desirable. As a result, hundreds of them are now missing parts, which are either recovered by collectors or seized by souvenir hunters in search of trinkets. Although the last of the graveyards was closed in 2010 due to environmental concerns, there are still plenty of creepy photos lurking online. 3. DavisMonthan Air Base. Although some airlines place retired aircraft in open-air aviation museums, the vast majority end up in boneyards or graveyards following retirement. Thousands of planes, for example, are stored in enormous boneyards dotting the southwest United States deserts. The geology of the desert allows the planes to be moved easily. If you drive along South Kolb Road in Tucson, Arizona, you'll notice that the familiar residences give way to something strange. Rows of planes, ranging in size from enormous cargo lifters to heavy bombers. They're all sprawled out, immobile and silent in the scorching desert sun. This is the 309th Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group, also known as the Boneyard, and it's the world's largest aircraft storage and preservation facility, located at DavisMonthan Air Force Base. More than 4,000 aircraft and 13 aerospace vehicles from the US Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, Navy, Marine Corps, and NASA are housed here on approximately 2,600 acres. Although the DavisMonthan holds a variety of planes, it's mostly military aviation vessels. Some appear brand new, others are protected from sand and dust by protective covers. Some planes have been reduced to dilapidated spare parts within the hangars, ready to be sent out to various sites throughout the world to assist other planes in resuming flight. 2. Nuebu Ship Graveyard. Mauritius's bay is littered with rusting ships that were cheaper to abandon in the harbour rather than dismantle. The city of Nuebu is the second largest city in Mauritius, but because of the limited opportunities for work, it's also somewhat poor. This economic struggle led to widespread corruption in the local government. Locals began leaving obsolete and undesired vessels in the bay's shallow waters in the 1980s. Ships began to arrive from all over the world to be abandoned in Nuebu, assisted by local authorities who were only too willing to receive a payment in exchange for turning a blind eye. Over 300 rusting vessels have accumulated over the years. Cargo vessels, fishing trawlers, and even naval cruisers are among the dump. Despite efforts to prevent additional dumping, the number of abandoned ships continues to climb. As a major iron ore exporter, locals have had little reason to dismantle the ships for scrap. However, the half-sunken vessels serve as a fish breeding ground, and local fishermen frequently lay nets between the boats. The government's current intention is to utilize the ships to create an artificial reef in deeper waters, although little has been done since the idea was revealed in 2001. 1. Chernobyl Disaster Graveyard. The consequences of the Chernobyl accident started as soon as it became clear that the situation was extremely serious and the fourth reactor was out of control. Evacuation of population and decontamination of the surroundings of the power plants and structures needed to be done as swiftly as possible. So, obviously, there was a huge need for vehicles to assist in this. Today, many rest in vehicle graveyards in the Chernobyl zone. The radiation from the Chernobyl nuclear tragedy injured not just people and structures, but also the vast majority of vehicles used in the firefighting and cleanup operations. Various engineering vehicles and helicopters, along with special equipment designed for the conditions were used, but then had to be abandoned. That's why Chernobyl is full of forsaken vehicles that you can see almost everywhere in the area of the exclusion zone. The first fire engines to arrive at the tragic site had to be buried underground to prevent the travel of radiation. The firefighting helicopters, whose pilots and crews were among the worst affected by the radiation, can be found amidst the graveyards. Despite the grave dangers, locals have been discovered attempting to salvage metal from the rusty machines. Several people have been arrested in Ukraine for trying to rescue one of the Mi-8 helicopters used in operation. All of them say they plan to convert it into a cafe. Thanks for watching. Which one of these graveyards interests you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time, bye.